2014, ladies and gentlemen, saw the murderer of Gujarat, Narendra Modi, coming into power as Prime Minister of India. It shocked the secular Indians from all religions and walks of life. It jolted. With the advent of 21st century and 9/11 happening, India successfully crafted a narrative. Since then, we have seen multiple episodes from Mumbai attacks to Pathankot to Pulwama, where Indians tried to rein against terrorism. India successfully aligned itself with the West, being victim of terrorism. In the backdrop, Pulwama happened on 14 February 2019. Indian media and their Hindu leadership immediately started beating the war drums, wanting to teach a lesson. Saw this misconception manifesting through a so-called surgical strike across national border near international. Of its weaknesses, two underlying objectives were most critical. First, to establish a new norm while subduing the Pakistani leadership and forcing them to accept it as fate accomplished militarily. Ladies and gentlemen, undoubtedly, the day of 26th, still our leadership did not beat the drums of war, and our media maintained a posture of maturity, giving epitome of professionalism struck back, and not only struck back, but humbled the so-called three-time bigger, far advanced, intentionally avoiding human and material loss, again established Pakistan's desire for peace, maintaining varied response well below a critical threshold. Though the nature smiled at us and the MiG-21 Bison with Wing Commander Abhinandan. Ladies and gentlemen, at this hour on 27th February, with another Su-30 destroyed by PF and MI.
Honorable participants, worthy dignitaries, it's an honor for me to be speaking on this particular issue, which is very close to my heart and to all those people who are freedom loving, who have love for liberty in their hearts. I've been asked to express my views on the historical perspective and legal aspects of Kashmir issue. Let me begin by saying that as far as the legality of Kashmir issue is concerned, and so far as the legal dimension is concerned, Pakistan has a very strong case. Kashmir has a very strong case. The law is on our side. International law is on our side. Human rights law supports our arguments and our stance. The problem is the politics, the contemporary politics, and our positioning in the global framework at the moment. Historical analysis, whenever it is focused on a particular issue, and when it attempts to understand or undertake analysis in such a way which is solution oriented, and one must take cognizance of the sequence of events that took place in the historical framework. This is called the doctrine of historical particularism in sociology and anthropology. Let me elaborate my views within this context. A history of Kashmir and how it has been dealt with so far is a saga of challenges and opportunities. We have had many challenges thrown at us since 1947, and we attempted to handle those challenges one way or the other, some in a better way, some in a not very good manner. We exploited some of the opportunities that came our way, and we missed some of the opportunities. So in order to understand the existing scenario of Kashmir, present day situation in Kashmir in a historical paradigm, we must take stock of both the good that we did and the mistakes that we committed. My understanding is that since 1947, law, insofar as international law is concerned, insofar as human rights law is concerned, it has always been on our side. However, it is the politics which has led us to the present state of affairs. Having said this, in 1949, I believe was the first time when one of the UN resolutions, in fact, projected the issue of Kashmir to a level, and there has been many other resolutions since 1948 as well, then in 1949, but this particular resolution, and I'm not going to get into the technical details of those resolutions, but I'm just expressing my views in a restricted time frame, therefore I'll be just skipping all the legal details. But this particular resolution, in fact, projected a Kashmir issue and gave it two dimensions, basically, in international law. Number one, that Kashmir is an international dispute. Kashmir is a disputed territory. And then secondly, the second development was that the right of self-determination was accorded to the people of Kashmir. It was recognized that the people of Kashmir have a legitimate right to self-determination, and the world community must support it. So the legal framework was in support of the people of Kashmir. However, politically, we were dilly-dallying, and the world was also not that concerned, because political events, the Cold War, the bipolar world, confrontation between the East and the West, it resulted in sidelining the issue of Kashmir, insofar as the United Nations was concerned. On our part in Pakistan, we kept on emphasizing on solution, its global dimension, Kashmir as an international conflict, and to be resolved in accordance with the principles of international law.
First of all, I'm very thankful to CTST for inviting me on this very important conference. And my topic is basically the Kashmir issue and how the West takes it. So it's basically, first of all, I would like to give a small introduction to all the respectable people sitting in the audience. That it's a very rare opportunity that people who are directly linked with this conflict or who are leading this conflict can come before the international world and speak about their problems and how they're leading this peaceful political struggle. And right in our death cell for almost a year now, and whatever's happening over there, especially after 5th August, which the previous speaker quite impeccably explained, that this was a lawfare, because the latest war that is happening in the world now is through the stroke of a pen or a presidential order, that all the rights of the Kashmiri people have been snatched from them. And in simple terms, it's like becoming a refugee in your own land. All your ownership rights are taken away, either through various demography policies that they've announced, of monetization, of seizing all the investments, the savings of the Kashmiri people, and being controlled by the center of Delhi, or citizenship right being given to Indian students who are being shifted to Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and taking away the educational rights of the Kashmiri people. And you must have seen yesterday pictures of a lot of Kashmiri students running towards school after like almost a year they went to school. But this is also just a media stunt, I would say, because of Donald Trump visiting India. But the reality on ground is that this is the world's most prolonged, deadliest, scariest martial law ever to be imposed on an unarmed and a defenseless nation. And all political voices that are representing the pulse of the people, the right to self-determination as enshrined in the UN resolutions. They are all locked up. There's a blanket ban on political mobilization, political processions. They are living under siege, literally, and the worst crime ever in the world is genocide, and which is right now being committed over there. And whatever's happening in Delhi, that is part of the game, because it was part of the election manifesto, abrogation of Article 370. This RSS terrorist mindset regime that is in power right now, it's so horrifying, the effects that is having on the minorities within India. There is a civil war going on. But what is happening with the Kashmiris, I mean, we're not even Indians, we're not a part of India, but over 70 years, and we are facing this wrath, and with each and every passing day, we are seeing the policies of India of hatred, of force, but in any way whatsoever that they have applied to kill the pulse, the sentiment of the people, the anger within our people has grown, it has manifolded. And it's a scary situation because we need a global recognition and responsibility to realize how important it is to resolve this issue peacefully, because last year on 27th of February, nuclear codes were exchanged between both the countries, and this was another proof that this issue is not a national or local or regional issue. This is definitely a global issue. And I am a student of economics, and if you study the Global Peace Index all over the world, it's very, very important to realize how important peace is for economic growth and development. And whatever India is doing right now, and the controls of the nuclear arms are in the hands of Mr. Modi, who has come literally, his winning tactic has been over butchering of the Kashmiris and making it into a bigger graveyard. And right now, we have seen globally also how things have, how the media has reacted, but unfortunately, no substantial steps have been taken to stop India. Either it's just lip service or some articles or some media campaigns, but the world is not realizing that this volcano is going to erupt someday. And especially after 9/11, when the world order changed, it was basically the Kashmiris who were the first to own this, and especially after Bill Clinton, he announced after 9/11 various peace pacts around the world and wanted to solve the Palestinian and the Kashmir conflict. It was the Kashmiris who owned it, and it's a majority, 99.9% peaceful movement right now that's going on, and we are still following that path, unfortunately, though we are facing the highest occupation. And India is hell-bent upon provoking the Kashmiri people to go towards violence, because there is absolutely no political space. So I think it's very, very important for the world to come forward and also to realize the international dimensions, and also about the Universal Human Rights Charter, that every human being has a right to honor, dignity and freedom. But unfortunately, it is a pipe dream for Kashmiris. And any kind of solution for the Kashmir issue, when I even met the UN Secretary General, who was here in Pakistan in an informal meeting, I shared with him that no matter how many times you offer your good offices, but if the intentions of India is always to avoid, then what more? And I told him quite categorically that the solution to the Kashmir issue lies with the top Kashmiri leadership, who are calling the shots, who are leading the movement. And if they are in death cells, they are being killed, they are being hanged, then who is going to solve this issue? If the world wants to play an active role, then they should move forward and raise a campaign to release the leadership. Because without the leadership, any movement or any solution is impossible. Are we going to go to every Kashmiri and ask them what they want, or are we going to go for the majority of the wave and go forward for a plebiscite? So this is very, very important that we safeguard the leadership over there and the people, lift that curfew, and for that I think a humanitarian, it's my suggestion that a humanitarian corridor must be made to save the people who are literally starving to death right now. Even when I eat food or drink water, I just realize what my family is doing over there. I mean, this is happening in the 21st century. I mean, I'm quite casually talking about this, but this is the reality. This is what we are going through on a daily basis, and it's been numerous curfews that we have faced. massacres the whole year round. It's a calendar of various death anniversaries of the people, the innocent people that are dying. And we are just, okay, I'll just conclude it. But in the end, I would just like to propose one more thing, that I think this is the time. I mean, the Kashmiris have done their maximum to follow international norms and parameters for a peaceful solution. Our top leadership, the Hurriyat leaders, they've always welcomed a peaceful solution. And now the biggest obstacle is India. So I think it's time for the international world to campaign for this, for a just solution. And the only just solution, in my opinion, is because we have seen 50 years of bilateralism between India and Pakistan, and each time India has backed out or ditched the peace processes. So now I think the world must realize that a multilateral solution is the only option, because India has surpassed all bilateral treaties, all dialogues, everything. They've even surpassed their own constitution through a unilateral decision. So I think this should be the focus, and we should move towards a solution, because I don't know, otherwise I see an entire graveyard of Kashmiris becoming extinct, and the only thing would be the handicrafts that you would see in museums of the Kashmiri people, and that would be it. And we would all be like mute spectators. So I think we should, if you want to save the planet, if you want to work for peace, then if you want the world to stop another nuclear war, God forbid, from happening, so let's give Kashmiris a voice. Thank you once again.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Habibullah Dada Bhai Sahab, staff of the think tank, excellencies, defense attaches, and friends, ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum. Pleasure to be with you to share my views on this great commemorative event covering what happened last year on this very day. This, at the outset, I must tell you how crucial, how important was. The first one was when Alam Saab shot 5 aeroplanes in 1 minute, 5 hunters, and this is the second one. What happened on this day? Hindutva motivated Prime Minister Modi, he decided to violate the sovereignty of Pakistan and sent a large package of fighter and bomber, that is strike aircraft, into Pakistan to strike targets across the international border. And what exactly happened was that on 14th of February, there was this kid, Dar, who was an Indian national. He drove an Indian truck. He had RDX that was Indian, and he went and blew himself up in the reserve police convoy, killed 30 people, and lo and behold, as expected, they blamed Pakistan, and they decided to violate our sovereignty. So on 26th night, around 1:30, 12 Mirages equipped with Israeli-made spice bombs, they took off from Gavalia, stayed low altitude. They were supported by a number of Sukhoi 30s as escorts and aided by the AWACS and of course air-to-air refuelers, because on the way back they would run low on fuel. So they came in from the southeasterly direction. We had our combat air patrols in place. Air Marshal Hari Kumar, who was the AOC Western Air Command, he writes in an article just today that at that time there was only one cap. There was a cap, and this was an F-16 cap over Marine. And to divert that cap, they sent in a strike package towards Bhavalpur, which was Jaguars aided by Su-30. So this cap, so he's wrong. There were more combat air patrols standing by. But obviously they had not one, but probably two deceptions. So as they went southwards, because air power cannot be everywhere. So that is the time these people came in, rose up, climbed, and they hastily turned northwards, came and stayed in our territory for 1 minute and penetrated to no more than 10 nautical miles, loaded their weapons, and hastily made an exit. These weapons, of course, traveled about 40 kilometers and hit a target at Japa, which was not the actual one. And thank goodness for this, because otherwise they would have written off 200 plus young children in a madrasa who were supposed to be there learning Quran. So that was their part. Now our part started. Immediately we, of course, everybody knew. And next morning the political military leadership went into a huddle and they decided, I think the Prime Minister gave two objectives. The military objective was restore military deterrence. And the political objective was that re-establish sovereignty of Pakistan. So the Air Force leadership had their own meeting, led by the Chief of Air Staff, who has DCS operations. And Mujahid Anwar, he actually led this Air Force like a tiger at that time. I must inform you that what Mr. Asad Umar said in the assembly, and it really warmed my heart. He said, here was an air chief who commanded a group which was half the size, if not one-third, and he sounded so confident, full of belief, it seemed as if he's commanding the other side. So they decided that there will be a response because no lives had been lost, no property had been damaged. So they said three things. One, it is going to be calibrated. Two, graduated. And three, most importantly, proportionate. And for twofold reasons. One, morality, that we are going to take targets out and we will not damage any property or kill people. And two, do not give any pretext to the Indian leadership to escalate the conflict. So we chose a time and place of our conflict, which was of strike the next day, and these two JF-17s, of course, more took off at that time with locally made bombs, which because they had range extension kits, 1,000-pounder bombs. So they launched the REKs, and there were 4 Mirages that took off with H-4 weapons. And they struck targets in the Rajouri, Punch area, and Naushera area. And of course, some of these images have already been made public, which clearly show that the H-4 weapon, because it can give a good TV image, they actually, they looked at the ammunition dump that they were wanting to strike. At the last moment, they took the impact point and the pepper away, and the bombs fell in vacant area. This was a planned maneuver. Even yesterday, the Indian Air Chief was saying they did not damage anything. This was absolutely planned. And once the bombs are locked, now that is the time all hell breaks loose, because till then they had not known that we are going to respond. Actually, the last day, throughout the night on 26th and 26th day, the Indian air power was up in strength, expecting a riposte, which never came. We chose a time and place, and this was 9:30 the next morning. We didn't choose dusk, we didn't choose dawn, because that is the normal time you have deception and you are able to surprise the enemy. So when these aeroplanes went and locked the bombs and came back, now at that time Hari Kumar says today that they had a Mirage 2000 cap in the area, they had a Sukhoi 30 cap in the area. So he accepts that. But no MiG-21s at that time. And our F-16s, unlike theirs, they stood at 30,000 feet around in some localities of Azad Kashmir. Now that is the time, one Sukhoi 30, two Sukhoi 30s, they come towards the F-16s, and this young kid, Squadron Leader Hassan Siddiqui, he logs after filtering all information, because there is a lot of work in the cockpit, unlike what we used to do in the Indian beach site F-6s and F-7s. So he logs a BVR and takes out the Sukhoi 30. The same day, the Indian television reports the death of 2 fighter pilots in a road accident, but they don't accept it. The Indian Air Vice Marshal, and this video was shown yesterday also, he actually shows the pieces of that AMRAAM of the BVR, but he does not accept that this came out of the wreckage of the Sukhoi 30. So that's the proof that we actually knocked at Sukhoi 30, it fell in their area. Now this is the time that panic sets in. We used our EW assets, the way Alan Vaughan says over here in the short video. We used our AWACS, and all of a sudden, because we were monitoring their radio telephony also. So all of a sudden the calls come from the Sukhoi 30 that they are having data link synchronization problem because there were more C-130s. Hari Kumar accepts only 2 of them. And so they abort the mission. The Mirage 2000, which are very superior aeroplanes, but when you do not have situational awareness and when you have, I would say very humbly, there are young guns sitting over here, air marshals, not young guns, they're old enough. The young guns, of course, are Hassan Siddiqui. They were young when we were air marshals. So these people, this is the time when they scramble more. So Mirage 2000, they say they have aerial intercept radar problems about the mission. So they scramble 5 MiG-21s. Abhinandan stays low altitude in the backdrop of permanent range so that the radars are not able to pick up. But the moment he pulls up and we are looking down on him and our radars are painting him. So the moment he pulls up, Wing Commander Noman, who was in a grind, he pulls up, quickly samples all the information and logs a BVR and shoots Abhinandan down and rest all his history. They claimed even yesterday, Air Chief Marshal Badoria claimed that he shot an F-16. It's not true at all, because international observers are there, and like yesterday Air Marshal Wasimuddin was saying, actually, the moment you lose an F-16, the entire world will know this. And of course, they also said Air Marshal Wasimuddin, who is now retired, his son, Squadron Leader Shazazuddin, was shot down. And the picture they painted was of a very plucky and audacious fighter pilot by the name of Meher Gul, Group Captain Meher Gul. He was in China. He had a photograph with a Sukhoi 30 that was shown that he's the one that we shot and he fell martyr. This plucky fighter pilot, who was a young thing, very, very brave and very aggressive. So he was ferrying, during this operation, he was ferrying a formation of 3 F-7PGs, and to show to the Indians, he kept his call sign Shahzaz Leader, Shahzaz 2, Shahzaz 3, that the Indians should monitor that Shahzaz is well and alive, and Shahzaz was actually, Wasimuddin has nobody in the Air Force. So this was a lie. Ladies and gentlemen, that is how we re-established our sovereignty. That is how we restored military deterrence. How did we do this? Number one, we have always learned to fight outnumbered. The Indian Air Force is twice, if not 1/3, we are 1/3 the size of they are established for 42 squadrons, they actually have 32, we are around 18 and 19. So their budget is about $10 billion a year, ours is under $2 billion. So we fight outnumbered. So number two, legacy. I must make a mention to you, Air Marshal Najib, long time back, when he went to get H-2 weapon from South Africa, there was this English-speaking Englishman, air chief, who he wanted to introduce Pakistan Air Force, and he said, no, I know about Pakistan Air Force. He said, no, sir, I must tell you. He said, no, when the air chief of a country, he leads the republic they fly past, it speaks volumes. Number two, he said, no, but there is a bigger reason. When Mozambique Air Force got MiG-21 and they had a war with Mozambique and they had Mirages, they said, we didn't know how to fight a MiG-21. So they rang up their cousins in Tel Aviv. They said, tell us. So they gave big bumps of how to doghouse diagrams and energy diagrams. They said, we can't read anything out of it. They said, don't worry. We will give you a small little handwritten pressing. So this handwritten pressing, ladies and gentlemen, was written by who? Alam Saab. 15 minutes nahi hai beta? Okay. I'll conclude. So this Alam Saab and his people, and this is how Mossad picked it up from Syria, gave it to these people here in the Israeli Air Force, and Israeli Air Force gave to South African Air Force. So that's the story. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan Air Force is prepared. Pakistani military is prepared. They tried twice they tried to do surgical strikes against the army. Battle hardened, fully prepared, couldn't do a thing. So they decided to take the aerial route, and they again failed. What is likely to happen? More false flag operations after all that has been covered, with all the problems that Indians have. there will be more opportunities for the young guns to restore more sovereignties and more military deterrences. Pakistan Air Force, ladies and gentlemen, is ready. We don't have an option. Our nation does not have an option. We will have to fight outnumbered. We will have to defend ourselves over and over and over again. I am wearing this very sky blue jacket as a sky blue warrior because today's red letter day, because of these air marshals, but actually the young guns like Hassan Siddiqui and Noman gives me pride and joy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your intriguing address. Based in UK, will be joining us today for his address through video call. Here is Mr. Alan Barnes.
Once they left the Pakistani CATS patrol, they could not have the courage to actually carry out what they thought they were actually able to carry out.
In March 2000, fired the Spice 2000 standoff weapons, which overshot the target.
With the Indian bomb standoff range of over 60 kilometers, they traversed over 50 kilometers and fell into a forested area, quite a distance from the apparent intended target, and decimated nothing more than a few pine trees.
Wasn't the conventional bombing where they had come over Balakot and bombed, in which case, of course, we could have intercepted them.
Although there was no loss of lives and property on ground, the country's sovereignty had been violated. It seemed that Narendra Modi saw punitive action against Pakistan as his key to a landslide victory in the upcoming elections.
In your bid to show Kashmir as a counter-terrorism challenge, while it is clearly an issue of self-determination under UN Charter and dates back to 1947, that you were willing to put the population, 1.2 billion people of this region, under the threat of a nuclear war.
Inferiority complex, retarded in leadership, which is like a dinosaur, huge in size but mindless.
Prime Minister summoned national security meeting the same morning.
The response will come at the point and time of our choosing.
There was consensus that the response had to be as measured and controlled as possible. The PAF, who was well prepared for a whole range of targeting options, was given the go-ahead by the country's Prime Minister. On the very next day, brief commenced early in the morning at an undisclosed airbase. Since the mission purpose was essentially to demonstrate Pakistan's resolve and capability, the general area of bombing were the open spaces and military garrisons near the line of control.
Aim of our today's mission is going to be 100% bombs on target, whereas sweep is going to ensure survival of all strikes. It's going to be our top priority of the mission.
At 0900 hours on the morning of 27 February 2019, fighter jets from different elite squadrons rolled down the runway.
Within the next 24 hours, the Indian Air Force was on a high level of alert, but they were expecting the Pakistani Air Force to attack at night, but they didn't. They attacked during daylight hours.
We had got on the morning, 9 o'clock of 27th February.
And the attack came in the shape of two Mirage 5 PAs armed with two H4 standoff weapons, backed up by JF-17s with 1,000-pound range extension kits.
Two Mirages, along with JF-17s, headed towards their respective pre-designated targets in Indian-occupied Kashmir.
Pakistan should be on notice. All options are on the table. All options are on the table.
They went off, the H4s were fired,
and you can see the target designated box shift away from the intended target because now the pilot wants the bomb to hit about 1,000 yards away.
On that, I immediately unlocked the weapon and took it towards the right side to unpopulated area and the weapon impacting point which I have selected.
The H4 bomb is about 2,600 pounds in weight. So the TNT, the explosive, is immense.
The aim was not to go for a collateral damage, so we engaged the target slightly offset, show them that can engage any target at our own time of choosing and at our own will.
PAF's ground strike had, meanwhile, rung alarms on the Indian air defense radars. Formation from PAF's fighter sweep was vectored towards two approaching IAF fighters.
You've got to understand that the communications between all the Indian Air Force aircraft would have been jammed. It must have been pretty difficult out there, up in the air, not knowing what was going on.
After sampling the target data and confirming valid firing parameters, squadron leader Hassan fired air-to-air missile.
Camera 1, Fox 3 off the group.
Su-30 is not an ordinary aircraft. It is a multi-role, almost a fifth generation platform.
Soon after the shootout, all hell broke loose in the Indian camp.
They had everything that they had that particular day because they were expecting Pakistan Air Force to respond. After having bombed a part of our piece of our geography, they knew what the Pakistan Air Force was going to do to them in the next couple of days.
An IAF Mi-17 helicopter was scrambled for a search and rescue mission of downed Su-30 MKI. But in the chaos, it was taken for a hostile unmanned aerial vehicle by the Indian Air Defense Unit at Srinagar, who fired a surface-to-air missile at it, leading to a case of horrific fratricide.
And you have to ask yourself, why would an Mi-17 be flying in the area? It appears to me and to many other commentators that that aircraft was there on a combat search and rescue mission to pick up the downed Su-30 pilot.
In the ongoing fracas, the patrolling Indian formations dispersed. 5 MiG-21 Bisons of number 51 Squadron were scrambled successively from Srinagar.
The jamming aircraft, which did a superb job, absolutely superb job jamming the communications of the Indian Air Force.
Primarily, he couldn't hear the instructions of the ground controller at all.
Before he could even get his bearings, Abinadan's MiG-21 was hit by a missile launched by Wing Commander Noman Ali Khan.
It was a planned execution kind of tactics we normally execute in our training. Copy kill, other one trailing by 10 miles, bugging out.
It was day, but it became a dark night for them. They didn't know what had hit them.
Abinandan then ejected. Ultimately, the Pakistani army came along and took him away.
Military shot down 2 Indian jets today after they crossed the disputed border in
Pakistan military also says its warplanes carried out airstrikes inside India.
Pakistani Air Force shot down a Sukhoi 30 MKI.
Found on the news that the Pakistan Air Force shot down a MiG-21 Bison and an Su-30 MKI. So I remember being absolutely gobsmacked.
Prime Minister Imran Khan announced his decision to repatriate Wing Commander Abinadan to India as a gesture of peace to de-escalate the tension between the two neighbors.
As a peace gesture,
It was an excellent gesture, very graceful, understandable. And it is a continuity of our history. A lot of our conquerors, they behaved in exactly the same way. It's simple plain magnanimity.
After that, the Indian government started lying brazenly.
And you gave him credit for the F-16.
That is his skill. He was the only guy there.
Yeah, that with an R-73. Yeah, that is the weapon that he had selected.
We have the R-73 still attached to the motor rail, and it still has the thrust vectoring unit underneath. And this is the missile which many in India claim actually shot down the F-16, which, as we can see, is still here.
The aerial engagement over Kashmir on 27 February 2019 not only confined growing Indian threats to Pakistan, but it also highlighted Kashmir issue unlike ever before, with more and more world leaders calling out for peaceful resolution of this dispute.
Of South Asia cannot be separated from the Kashmiri issue.
Because I've heard so much about Kashmir. Such a beautiful name. It's supposed to be such a beautiful part of the world, but right now there's just bombs all over the place. They say everywhere you go you have bombs. It's a terrible situation, been going on for many years.
All the heads of states are actually aware
to what I'm doing. So I always start with a caveat, which is that from time to time I end up wearing my analyst hat more than my official hat. So this is going to be a mix again. Partly because what we've just seen overwhelms me and I'm sure everybody else in this crowd. So let me just begin by saluting our armed forces once again. Yesterday we had a very successful event with the Prime Minister in the chair at the PM office, again commemorating this occasion. You know, the theme of your seminar here and what I've been asked to talk about, the threat to South Asia. I'll tell you that when we were discussing this commemoration, not only yesterday's event, but this moment, there was one fundamental direction given to me as we were thinking through this, which is we are a responsible nation that has acted with restraint last year, that will continue to act with restraint whenever something like this happens, but we are also very clear that our resolve to respond to any misadventure remains. The tagline for this, though, throughout it was stressed to me, was that Pakistan wants peace. And I stand here responsibly in front of you to say that even despite everything that we are seeing happen on our eastern front, Pakistan still wants peace in the region. Let me though now unpack why that peace has remained elusive. And at least I, quite frankly, like the Prime Minister has said many times, remain fairly pessimistic. Let me first touch on the theme of responsibility. This is very important to note. This shows the character of who we are. Because quite frankly, in another country, where despite all of what we've seen on the screen, the last week has been about warmongering, about reliving the fiction, about creating lies on what happened. And here we are, rather than talking about what we could and creating a war frenzy, we are stressing again and again the two words, responsibility and peace. And this is a message for us, but this is also a message for the world. How responsible? One, all the messaging throughout this last week has been built around that, despite whatever may come from the other side. Second, whatever may be happening on our eastern front, there is not a single word that you've found from the entire world, and we don't usually get sympathy from much of the world when it comes to India, Pakistan. There's not a single word that has criticized Pakistan's behavior since August 5th. Not one independent word that says that. Why? Because there's a conscious policy decision that we will maintain our principled stance on every issue, but beyond that, we are the party that is responsible and mature and will continue to engage in a long-term political, moral and diplomatic struggle for the Kashmir cause. A word about Kashmir. We've talked a lot about what is happening there. I'm sure it came up today. I'm sure it will come up again. But I want to make a different point today. This has been raised to me and others. You know, we meet sort of foreign dignitaries. And again, the conversation goes back to, oh, it's an India-Pakistan dispute and you really are talking about real estate. I want to reiterate Pakistan's position since August 5th and before, but especially since August 5th because it's come up so many times. What are we saying? There are 2 points that Pakistan has continued to make to the world. Number 1, universal human rights. Just ensure that the 8 million who are in an open jail get the right that every human being is born with, which is codified in international law and conventions, and the entire world, including those who talk about human rights more than everybody else, has accepted as the norm. That's point number 1. That's the only thing we are asking on that. Fundamental human rights of the Kashmiris who are in an open jail, no less, since August 5th. And what is the second point? The world is governed, as anarchic as it may be, by certain laws called the international law. Lawyers are sitting here, I can see Temur and others. What are we saying? Just follow the very law and the very resolutions you, the world, came up with to solve this dispute. There is not a third message here. And if you add these 2 messages, what does it get to? A normal life for the Kashmiri and a right to self-determination. That's it. There is no other conversation here. The word real estate does not show up in anything that we are saying. And the question, quite frankly, I ask my colleagues and counterparts from other countries is, you tell us, how else can Pakistan show its responsibility and maturity in the face of everything that we are getting from our eastern neighbor? And I will promise you, there's not one who has come to me and said, we have a better idea than what you are doing. So I think it's about time that this policy, this vision, this mindset that comes from the leadership, both civil and military, should be internalized both at home but also by the world, by the international community that keeps talking about this and quite frankly, unfortunately, has not done nearly as much as one would have hoped. Let me also quickly touch upon our eastern neighbor. Look, I want to be clear about one thing. What is happening in India is worrying the entire world. Not only Pakistan, the entire world. Pick up the Western press, pick up every single piece of writing that you get. Just today, this morning, the American human rights group has again sort of formally raised concern about what has been happening in New Delhi. But the one thing I want to clarify, the issue of Kashmir is a separate, self-contained, internationally recognized dispute. Because I've seen some effort to lump this with, oh, all of India. No, Kashmir is not India. Kashmir is a conversation about an international dispute, and what is happening in India is a completely separate thing. And the only reason that our Prime Minister yesterday and many times before has continued to raise the issue of what is happening is because of our worry that it will directly affect us. And at least now let me wear my analyst's hat. I've written 2 books on counterterrorism and counterinsurgency. There is absolutely no way for any country, any state, to put this genie back in the bottle once you start going to the extent of rewriting history and brainwashing minds. You cannot. There is no evidence in modern history that that has been achieved. And if that's true, then it's my legitimate right not to talk about what is happening, absolutely, but my legitimate right to raise concern with the world on how will we manage stability in this region if you get to a point where this mayhem starts to spill over, if there are refugee issues. All of this has been talked about by the Pakistani leadership in this spirit. There's no meddling, there's no conversation of what is happening. The issue is, when you come to us and talk about South Asian security and stability, we are telling you again and again that there is one root cause for that to happen. If you're not going to address that root cause, no matter what else we do, it's just putting band-aids on the problem. That is why we are raising this issue. That is why the leadership keeps talking about it. And that is why it is crucial for the world to recognize just how dangerous this situation is. I was given 10 minutes, so let me make one other point and then conclude, which is, don't forget Pakistan's western border. Don't forget what is happening as we speak. The Pakistani leadership is in Qatar. Why? Because thanks to Pakistan and other partners, of course, we have managed to reach what seemed impossible for years and years. When I was in the US, it was famously called America's longest war. Today, the US and everybody else is recognizing that that longest war would have gone on for much longer had this impending peace agreement not been signed. And inshallah, as it goes through in the next couple of days, there's another phase after this. I mean, there's a lot more to be done in Afghanistan to get to real peace. But Pakistan's role was to facilitate this phase of that negotiation for now. And we've managed that, and the world has recognized it. Now from here, the intra-Afghan dialogue, as it's called, is really the Afghans who have to figure out what they want in terms of the future of their country. It is not for Pakistan or anybody else to decide, but let me also make it clear. Because it is for Afghanistan to decide, it is also not for Pakistan to take the blame for whatever happens from here on in. It's not going to be a smooth process, everybody knows this. Pakistan has facilitated this beyond what we were asked to do. And you know, I was talking, I'll share with you, I was talking to a couple of Western interlocutors. And you know, there's always this instrumental view of Pakistan has helped, but it needs to do this, etc. And I told them, look, once I came in the system, I realized one thing, which is very troubling for me, as somebody who's looking at national security issues. The amount of time, actual clock time, Pakistani leadership has spent on Afghanistan is very unfair to be asking Pakistan to keep doing that. We have so many issues. We have to deal with our own country. You are asking us to spend the opportunity cost of that time, meeting after meeting. People have to internalize how much Pakistan has done. And so, let me just bring all of this together. If what I have described to you was not the vision of the government, not the vision of the state, you wouldn't have seen a pattern of peacemaking from Pakistan. Whether it's the Afghan negotiations, or it's our view on India, our principled stand and mature stand on India, or it is Iran and Saudi Arabia, or it is whatever. That is the direction given by the leadership very clearly. And Pakistan will continue to do that against odds. It's not easy when you go and help friends. But we will keep doing that. So I wanted to put that on the table. If South Asian security is under threat, please don't come and ask me. Look around the region, figure out, go and help before it's too late. Let me just end once again by saluting our armed forces for what we've seen here, for what we saw yesterday in our event, and for what they continue to do for us every single day without us realizing behind the scenes. Thank you very much.
The President of Pakistan, Mr. Arfi Alvi. Special Assistant to PM, Mr. Moeed Yusuf. Senator Mohammad Ali Saif. Air Marshal Masood Akhtar. Mrs. Mishal Malik. Mr. Fahad Hussain. Our very honorable chief guest, President Arfi Alvi, is requested to come to the podium for a keynote address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Abdullah Dadabai, Chairman, Center for Peace, Security and Development Studies, CPSD. Mr. Habibullah Dadabai, CEO, Digital Broadcast TV. Muhtarama Mashal Malik Sahiba, Mohid Yusuf Sahab, Senator Sahiba Sahab, Doston Saadiyo Fahad Hussain, Doston Saathiyon, Assalamu Alaikum. I feel honored to be a part of this occasion and commemorating the fact that on the same day last year, Pakistan showed its brilliance. At the same time, Pakistan showed its intention for peace. Actually, my entire speech was summarized in the few statements which you saw here. But that dialogue and that insistence will never change. Pakistan has wanted peace in the region, that will never change. Pakistan is pointing out to a belligerent India in its attitude, that may change. And Pakistan's intention to support the Kashmir's cause comes out of the legal responsibility which Pakistan has, its moral responsibility, and the fact that Kashmiris are our brothers, and what they were promised at the time of partition, and promised by a nascent United Nations and a new Pakistan together in the community of the nations, that promise has to be delivered. So our intention has been the same, will remain the same. But what has happened over the past few years, Pakistan cannot close its eyes on that. And as I mentioned, it worries me, the situation today worries me tremendously. It is going exactly as what I have been thinking it would go into unless prevention is done. Last year, if I pick up what I have been saying, and it was nothing new, I am sure a lot of you also are predicting the same direction. We know when you polarize societies, very rarely does a leadership take it out of that polarization. It generally takes about 20 or 30 years. That cycle is not short. And let me give you an example. When the entire world was worried about the Soviet influence in Afghanistan, all of us together, including the United States and other nations, we constructed a jihadi liberation of Afghanistan. And when the Soviet Union withdrew from there, we thought that we'll switch off the button and jihad is over. Doesn't happen like that. the entire psyche of our people and the psyche of the Muslim Ummah had been stoked by that situation. Jihad meant liberation, and it continued. So whenever you polarize a people in any manner, whether on racial grounds, whether on ethnic grounds, or whether on linguistic grounds, that polarization has its momentum and goes on for at least a generation or two before the damage caused by that becomes evident, and nations then retract from that. Lessons are learnt over generations. Lessons are then forgotten after a few generations also. I'm also convinced of that. Because I still remember, to construct my argument, let me tell you, I still remember that in the 70s when I was studying in the US, United States had lost more than 50,000 lives in Vietnam. And the country felt war is abhorrent, war should not be gotten into, and it was a world where the United States had, we thought, learnt a lesson, and they thought they had learnt a lesson. But then later on, things kept on going in the same direction because a generation learns a lesson and promptly forgets. But between India and Pakistan, what has happened? Pakistan was liberated 70 years ago, 71 years ago, and there were promises made. There were principles of division of British India. And those principles were, of course, legally drafted, understood, clearly understood. But then mischief was played on us. That sowed the seeds of disharmony between the two countries. Mr. Gandhi was killed by an RSS, the mother party of BJP, by an RSS individual, because he was talking about peace and a secular India. Today the same gentleman, the same person, not gentleman, the same person who is a murderer of Gandhi is being elevated out of being a murderer into a hero in some sectors of India. But there is a polarization. I may disagree a little bit with what Mohit mentioned here. He said Kashmir is different and what's happening in India is different. No. Our histories and principles were together. In fact, Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, when Pakistan was formed, insisted on two individuals, Chaudhry Khaliquzzama Sahab and Nawab Muhammad Ismail Khan of Meerut. He insisted that the responsibility of the well-being of the Indian Muslims also is a part of partition, and that he requested these two individuals to stay in India and ensure the fact that there is peace between communities. Chaudhry Khaliquzzama Sahab migrated to Pakistan, but Nawab Muhammad Ismail Khan stayed in India, although his children had moved to Pakistan. So Kashmir is definitely an unfinished agenda of partition. And those who used to question the two-nation theory of Qaid-e-Azam, today in the Parliament of India, it is being said that Qaid-e-Azam actually predicted that these two nations need to be peacefully separated and then to uphold the principles of human rights between them, giving each other's minorities the rights which Qaid-e-Azam talked about. Now that is the history of Pakistan. It was founded on democratic principles. It was founded by a democratic vote and on the principles defined. So when the Kashmir issue came up, there was a nascent United Nations, a very young United Nations, where the world hoped for peace and hoped for resolution after the experience of the League of Nations and the First World War. The United Nations was a center we hoped that it will deliver peace. Today, that peace is elusive. Those decisions escape us because what is more important are vested interests. Nobody thought in the 50s that there would be vested interests rather than principles ruling on decisions between nations. If there are vested interests, you don't need a United Nations. You can sit together as a group anywhere, decide to provoke war, decide to ensure the fact that some minorities which were, or some majorities in regions which were promised freedom are not given freedom. So what is happening in the direction, and I must not miss out in congratulating our Pakistan Air Force and Pakistan Army for defeating terrorism over the last decades and for ensuring the fact that our borders are secure, whether from the air or from the ground or from the sea. A remarkable display of being small, of limited in resources, but reacting in a manner when you shoot down 2 Indian planes. Remarkable. It fills my chest with pride that we are a strong people defended by a very strong army. So nobody can lift its hand against us. But we have been responsible. Remember the fact that in 1974, there was no nuclear arms race in this region. Remember that in 1974, India blasted a so-called peaceful nuclear device. Have you ever heard that term? A peaceful nuclear device. That's the only country which has ever put a term, this is fake news. Parth, remember that when we talk about fake news, this is fake news. Weapons of mass destruction, for example, fake news. When countries deliberately make a fool out of its own people and try to fool the world. Peaceful nuclear detonation which prompted Pakistan to ensure that fact. A smaller country, limited resources, smaller in number of people, wanted to make sure that its defense with a belligerent neighbor who has not had peace in the region also. Its interference in Sri Lanka, its interference in East Pakistan, its strangulation historically of Nepal and its resources. A belligerent India aspiring to be a permanent member of the United Nations, a belligerent India which does not understand the concept of human rights, which is famous for its killing of minorities. Don't forget the riots, I think it was 1983, the riots in Delhi against the Sikhs. More than 3,000 Sikhs were killed in one night on the streets of Delhi. Then in Gujarat, then false flag operations on the of the train and at Pulwama, the belligerence of Hindutva India, not created by us alone. People who read may remember Khushwant Singh's book, The End of India, and the arguments being presented today, and the scenery of India today, and the reality of India today exactly matches what Khushwant Singh wrote in 2003, and he must have spent a couple of years writing that book. So in this century, he predicted it's the end of India, and he said Pakistan will not destroy India. India will destroy itself from inside, and that is what we are seeing. Kashmir is a reflection of the same thing. It started from Kashmir, the isolation of Muslims, the fact that India never came to terms with the establishment of Pakistan, although they forced it upon Quaid-e-Azam. Quaid-e-Azam wanted a united India, but then he realized that the politicians in India will not allow these communities to stay together. So therefore, he demanded Pakistan and dragged Pakistan into history. So what is happening in India? My relatives are in India, therefore it pains me to see what is happening in India. There were movies made immediately after division or after establishment of Pakistan, in which the same dialogue which is today on the streets of India was meant as a taunt to every Muslim. अगर तुमको पाकिस्तान या मुसलमान पसंद है तो पाकिस्तान जाओ. If you think Pakistan is a good country, go to Pakistan. Don't stay in India. And that is the taunt which is there every day today in the streets of India. How can we stay away from that? It is an unfinished agenda. The rights of Muslims, Pakistan must voice. The rights of every minority in the world, Pakistan must voice. of every minority, whether they're Christians, and I remember, don't forget, because sometimes what happens, these occasions are celebrated to remind ourselves what is happening. There were in India, Christian priests were killed, churches were burned. Depends on which minority becomes a threat in which region. It's not a question of numbers. So when the Sikh minority were under threat, they were killed. Muslim minority has been under threat, so there were riots in Ahmedabad, there was riots in Gujarat, there were riots in Meerut, there are riots today also. First, the entire history of genocide has always been that first you disenfranchise a minority in a country based on any grounds, whether it's racial, whether they are Jews, whether it's a separate language, you first isolate them that you don't belong here, you're not citizen of this place. Then let the public react, burn their shops, kill them, isolate them, and then it leads to a genocide. We have seen that history happening in Europe. We have seen that happening in Myanmar, where the people in Rohingya, and we are predicting that will happen in India. So this is the time for the international community to react, to understand the fact. It is evident if you started looking at least from 2 years ago what was happening in India. The Indian politicians tried to fool. There is no difference. I don't think there is a difference of religion in a manner which I believe the Hindus are peaceful, the Muslims are peaceful. It is the politicians in India which is driving the Hindutva machine and tank over the Muslims. So I think today it is very important that the world understand what is happening. Pakistan showed the example of responsibility. I mentioned the fact that in 1974 there was a so-called peaceful nuclear blast by India, prompted Pakistan to take measures and steps. Then there was in 1999, there was a few nuclear blasts by India, again forcing Pakistan to show that we can defend ourselves. So the history of what has been happening has been of animosity between countries, of warmongering between countries is happening since a long time, so we cannot separate them away from each other. Pakistan has learned, like I mentioned, Pakistan has learned not to polarize its own people. Pakistan has learned that if you polarize your own people, there is a possibility of terrorism. Pakistan has battled terrorism better than any country in the world. I make that statement by conviction and by history, that trillions of dollars have been spent on fighting terrorism. But Pakistan is the most successful country. We have lost lives. We lost probably 100,000 lives in that. But we finally managed to defeat them. So Pakistan has learned. Pakistan has learned non-polarization. Pakistan has learned to fight terrorism, and it fights it. Pakistan has learned that hosting refugees is an expensive venture, but we showed to the world, the high and mighty from throughout the world have been giving us lessons on human rights, but are not ready to open their borders for desperate immigrants running away from wars created by responsible nations in the world. But Pakistan opened its borders, not a single voice emerged. And I repeat it because I want to make sure that the Pakistani people feel proud of that. And the UN Secretary General, when he came to Pakistan, I repeated that fact, that not only did we host 5.1 million refugees and 2.7 are still here, not only that we hosted them, not only the fact that they were here, but not a single political voice I remember in the National Assembly or in the press who said that these refugees should be sent back right away or not accepted in Pakistan. Today, I am privy to a communication where 40 refugees are being refused by a country in Europe. And we showed the world, you see, we don't do lip service, we've lived the human rights issue in Pakistan. That's where the country is mature. And then when you talk about a radical India and a responsible Pakistan, I must tell you, it's not the Pakistan government which is responsible. It's the people of Pakistan, the media of Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, the politicians of Pakistan, all have shown responsibility. And the best example is that in February last year and in the days building up to that February, the entire media, the entire people, the government and the armed forces talked about peace. There was a frenzy of peace on this side of the border. But there's a frenzy of war. And look at the Indian media, there's no, compare it and wait and you'll find out there was a frenzy of war in India. So Pakistan is definitely a very responsible Pakistan. Pakistan, not only the government of Pakistan, I want to insist, but all the segments, all the institutions of Pakistan have wanted peace. Now, what is the future? I believe we will keep on struggling. I believe that India may have learnt its lesson. I'm not sure yet. There's a resistance in India. There's a talk about Pakistan. There was even probably a Hindu girl who stood up in a public occasion and said Pakistan Zindabad. So there is an understanding in some minor class of India, but the behemoth of Modi's government is still going to react and continue to react. I fear that generally what happens is when there is resistance, they will tighten their belts. What you saw, the images, actually the images shake the world, and that's why I believe the images from Kashmir coming out of what India has been doing is very important, because Pakistan has made a commitment to itself that it wants peace, it wants to fight the Kashmir cause in every forum, which includes the media and the social media. These images are responsible. And for those of you, I would like to recall that I forget the name of the Syrian boy who drowned in the Mediterranean. That image must have created shock in the entire world. So these images are important. So the images coming from Kashmir, and that is why India has sealed Kashmir. It's still under siege. It's like a prison. But ladies and gentlemen, don't forget the fact that there are reports, there are images that India is constructing prisons for the people who will be disenfranchised in their registration of the Citizenship Amendment Act. That's what they did in Assam. What is that for? Are they going to send those people somewhere, or just isolating them in the ghettos, in concentration camps? Not only, the government has said that they've created those prisons. And what are they asking for? Even in Pakistan, if you go around asking the poor that you bring your property document of your grandfather, how many poor people will have property documents of their grandfather? And if you don't have there are two boxes. If you don't bring the property documents, then if you're a Hindu, you will get a nationality. If you're if you're a Muslim, you won't. So that's a blatant something which the Muslims of India have recognized. Now the reaction, the knee-jerk reaction of the BJP government is what you have been seeing all around. The images, what happened at the Babri Mosque, those images from Delhi you have seen. So I believe things may not be going in the right direction, and that is why I heard a very responsible statement by the Prime Minister yesterday. He said the international community, India is in a crisis. He said the international community must guide India out of that crisis. Very responsible. How more responsible can he be? That they must guide India out of that crisis. I am worried about all those in India who will go through this chaos. There are books written by Rana Ayub, a journalist, on the Gujarat crisis and the inside information. The judiciary helped liberate those criminals, and there are allegations against Amit Shah also, there are against Mr. Modi also, and these are not new allegations. The United States government for almost a decade did not give a visa to Mr. Modi, because all the evidence pointed that in the Gujarat riots, his government was responsible, and if the books you read coming out of there, They were given the assurance that you do what you want to for 3 days, kill, rape, burn. You will not be touched for 3 days. But then we'll have to show some writ of the state. These are statements made by responsible people, by Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah, etc., before those riots happened. Went on for 3 days. Every criminal responsible almost everyone has been released. No action has been taken. The judge somehow, unexplainably, died for a cause. Nobody knows how he died, and who was a little sympathetic to the cause. So, ladies and gentlemen, having said all that, I believe there is no more evidence which needs to be said. And during Mr. Trump's visit, what happened in Delhi was the biggest example that India is sick and has a problem. And it must be addressed by international pressure, because that may work. But unfortunately, my objection to all those strategists sitting among you is the fact that what if I look at the chessboard of this region, there are minorities in India under pressure, there is the Kashmir issue, Pakistan has helped achieve peace in Afghanistan, Pakistan wants peace for its own economic development, for the development of its own people, it insists on peace. And then we have in India, which is it has not participated in a SAARC council for 10 or 12 years today. So every effort at regional peace has vanished into thin air. All their promises have vanished into thin air. What Nehru said has vanished into thin air. What all the leaders of India have said all along this time has vanished into thin air. No promise they will carry, no legal verdict, no legal situation emanating from the United Nations they would carry. I am awaiting the UN High Commissioner's report on refugees. I hope there is a third report which comes out, which looks at Kashmir after August 5. I am hoping that the secular people living in India will be able to restrict whatever is happening, and this bandwagon of Modi, Hindutva, RSS will stop someday, soon enough, before a lot of killings happen. These riots and this destruction cause a lot of losses, and those people who try to emerge have lifted themselves up. You know, there may be only 2% members in the parliament in India who are Muslims. Although, according to Indian statistical figures, there are 13 to 14% at least Muslims in India, but only 2% in the parliament. How can they defend themselves? How can they voice whatever they want to voice? So, I believe Pakistan has been very responsible. It will continue on this track. I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan wants peace. Pakistan is looking for peace. But Pakistan will never compromise on the Kashmir issue. And Kashmir issue, again, as mentioned by Mohit, Kashmir issue is people. It's not real estate. It's people. We are concerned about the people. Pakistan will stand by them. Pakistan will never abandon them. Pakistan will make all sacrifices which are necessary. And the Prime Minister warned India, and we continue as a state, as my responsibility, to warn India not to do any false flag operation to try and hit Pakistan. Pulwama had nothing to do with Pakistan. Imagine our Prime Minister saying that if you have evidence, let us know. If you have any idea, let us know. We will help investigate if anything happened from the Pakistan side. We are sure it didn't happen, but just to reassure them that we are ready to investigate, and the result is that they attack Pakistan. The first time since 1965 they come into Pakistan territory and attack us. And I'm proud of the armed forces for having withstood that attack and making us proud as a nation. But this nation is a great country rising. Human rights, I gave the example, learned from terrorism, insisting on peace, have learned not to polarize our own people. And as our economy improves, it will create a greater space for a responsible Pakistan, ensuring the fact that we take on along all countries which need to demonstrate a responsible world order based on principles, based based on merit rather than vested interests and financial exploitation. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.